Hey everyone, I'm Mr. Hark. Today, I need you to pay close attention because this story isn't just strange, it changes everything you think you know. It's about a young woman who vanished in the 80s and survived because a Bigfoot couple secretly saved her life. For decades, she lived deep in the forest, meeting these creatures in secret, and what they eventually told her about humans is more shocking than their existence. And trust me, if you think you've heard this Bigfoot story before, you haven't. So before we jump in, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who swears Bigfoot is just a myth, because after hearing this, they might not be so sure anymore. All right, let's get into it. The first thing you should know is that on paper, I died in 1983. There's a death certificate with my name on it. Dana Miller, age 22, cause of death, presumed exposure or drowning in the Olympic Mountains. My parents had a funeral. People cried over an empty box. So if you're listening to this, you're already dealing with a dead woman talking. I think that's why I finally agreed to sit here and tell this. Part of me never came back from that mountain anyway. Part of me is still lying at the bottom of that ravine, staring up at a strip of sky and trying to decide if what I saw was real. For decades, I kept my mouth shut. I lived like a ghost while the world went on without me. And the two beings who saved me, they counted on that silence. They trusted me with it. But they also asked me for one thing, in the only way they knew how. They wanted me to tell you what they learned about us, about humans. That's the part that keeps me up at night. Not the fall, not the bones, not even Ash crying. It's what they understood about us, about what we are and what we keep doing. You're not going to like it. I don't like it either. But I owe them the truth. I was 22 that summer, a wildlife biology student at the University of Washington. I was the kid who always preferred mud and field guides over makeup. While other people went to parties, I went to the library or out on the trails. I wasn't a thrill seeker. I want to make that clear. I wasn't one of those adrenaline junkies chasing cliffs for fun. I was cautious, methodical. I grew up in Washington. I knew the mountains could kill you if you got cocky. That August, I was doing a solo backpacking trip in the Olympic Mountains as part of an independent study. I had permission to survey some amphibian populations in remote streams. It sounded grand and scientific, but really it was me, a pack, a tent, some traps, and a notebook. I liked being alone out there. The forest felt cleaner than people did. The first strange thing happened on my second night out. I was camped beside a narrow, fast creek, loud enough to drown out everything else. I fell asleep warm and tired, expecting the usual forest noise to carry me through the night. Around midnight, I woke up because the sound had stopped. No frogs, no insects. Even the creek sounded distant, like someone had turned it down. I was staring at the tent ceiling when something heavy hit the ground 10 or 15 feet away. You feel that kind of weight more than you hear it. It didn't move like a bear. Too slow, too deliberate. One step, then another. Then something brushed my food bag. I froze. I didn't even breathe. A soft huff came from the darkness, deeper than a deer, nothing like a bear. The thing circled my tent once, then walked off. A few seconds later, the forest switched back on like nothing had happened. In the morning, everything around camp looked normal. No tracks, no claw marks. My food untouched. The only odd thing was a tiny stack of flat stones by the fire ring. 3 stones, perfectly balanced. I put it back how I found it and moved on. The next morning, climbing a switchback toward a ridge, that feeling hit me. The one that tells you someone's behind you. I kept checking the trail. Nothing. When I stopped to adjust my pack, I heard a single crack down the slope, like something stepping on a dry branch. I called out. No answer. A few minutes later, it happened again. One snap, then silence. I should have turned back, but at 22, you think you're smarter than you are. That night, I camped above a ravine. The sky went from blue to pink to black. I was relaxed. Too relaxed. Then the forest went quiet again. A low rumble rolled through the ground, steady, controlled, and close. It lasted a few seconds and stopped. I whispered bear to myself even though I knew it wasn't. I must have drifted off because the next thing I remember is the fall. I was walking along the edge of that ravine the next afternoon, trying to make time. My map showed a stream crossing, and I wanted to get past it before the light dropped. The trail there was narrow, just a footpath etched into the slope, loose soil and roots and rocks. I remember stepping around a fallen branch. My right foot landed fine. My left foot didn't land at all. The ground just wasn't there. The edge had undercut from water or erosion. I don't know. I felt the soil crumble under my weight. There's this one freeze-frame picture in my head of my boot dangling over open air and the tops of trees below me, which makes no sense because I was looking down, not forward. But that's how memory works. It catches a few frames and your mind fills in the rest. Then I was falling. It wasn't a long fall, not like in the movies. There was no time to scream, no time to think. It was just impact. A white-hot bolt of pain in my left leg, the air punched out of my lungs, my pack slamming into the back of my head. I landed crooked on a slope of rock and loose dirt. I heard something in my ankle make a sound it should never make, like someone snapping a thick, wet branch. I don't remember if I blacked out right away. I remember lying there, gulping at the air, unable to move, my brain trying to update its map and failing. The sky was a thin stripe between the tops of the ravine walls. Ferns and roots stuck out around me like fingers. I tried to sit up. Pain shot from my ankle up into my spine. I screamed. It came out weak and hoarse. I don't know how long I lay there. Long enough to understand that no one knew exactly where I was. I'd been off trail more than I should have, cutting switchbacks, chasing a waypoint on my map. I tried to drag myself. Every movement made me want to throw up. I got maybe 2 or 3 feet before I realized the walls around me were basically vertical. There was no way I was climbing out on one good leg. I remember a very clear, very calm thought settling in. You're going to die here. At first, that idea felt abstract, like a line in a book. Then my throat started to close. My vision got grainy around the edges, and it stopped being abstract. I called out until my voice broke. Help. Is anyone there? Over and over, like that would magically make a hiker appear. No one answered. The forest above me kept doing what it does. An insect crawled up a blade of grass next to my face. A drop of water fell off a fern and hit my cheek. The little things go on. They don't care if you're terrified. At some point, I must have lost consciousness. The light went from gray to black too fast. The next part, I've replayed this so many times, I can't tell you where the line between exact memory and the way my brain glued it together is. I'll tell it how I remember it. I'm lying on my back. My throat is dry. My ankle is just a solid block of pain. I'm shivering even though the air doesn't feel that cold. And something is breathing above me. Slow, deep, not quite human, not an animal I recognize. I open my eyes, and there's a shape blocking the sky. It's huge. Wide shoulders, long arms, hair hanging down in messy curtains. For a second, in that half-dream state, I think it's a tree that moved. Then it leans closer. I see eyes, deep-set, dark, reflecting a sliver of light, not glowing, just focused on me. I remember trying to scream and only getting out a croak. Another shape moves behind the first. This one is slightly smaller, narrower through the chest. They both bend over me, and the air fills with the smell of damp soil and wet fur and something musky but clean, like crushed ferns. One of them makes a sound, a low, almost questioning rumble. The other answers with a higher, quicker set of clicks. A big hand, if you can call it a hand, reaches down toward my face. I flinched away as much as I could, which wasn't much. The skin on its palm is dark and rough, like weathered leather. The fingers are thick and long. There's hair on the back, but not so much on the palm. The hand stops inches from my cheek. It hovers there. Then, very slowly, a single fingertip touches my temple. Lightly, like it's testing me. Another sound, a rumble rising and falling. The second one makes a softer noise, almost like a coo. They talked over me. That's the only way I can describe it. No words. Just deep tones and clicks and tiny, almost whistle-like breaths. But the rhythm of it felt like language. Back and forth, then everything tilted. The larger one slid its arms under my back and knees. I felt myself lifted, my broken ankle screaming, my head lolling against a wall of hair and muscle. I weighed nothing to it, like a kid being scooped up. I remember the texture of its chest against my face. The hair was coarse but clean. Underneath, I could feel muscles shifting with each step, steady and sure. The world swung around me. Tree trunks slid past overhead. The ravine walls fell away. I caught glimpses of the ground under us, rocks, ferns, roots, but I never felt a stumble. The second one trotted alongside, one big hand resting lightly on my arm, as if steadying me. It kept making those tiny clicks, almost rhythmically. A reassurance maybe. Or maybe that's just what I needed it to be. At some point, the pain and the motion overwhelmed whatever adrenaline I had left. I passed out again. When I woke up, I was in the dark, not total darkness. There was a faint greenish light from somewhere above and to the left, but everything around me was shadow and smell. I was lying on something soft, not a mattress. It felt like layers of leaves and moss and maybe animal hides. Underneath that, I could hear a slow drip of water. The air was warm and still. I tried to move, and a hand, the smaller one I think, pressed gently but firmly against my shoulder, pushing me back down. A soft series of clicks, almost like you'd shush a child. My eyes adjusted. I saw a low ceiling of interwoven branches and mud, like a nest built against rock. The light was coming from a small opening near the top where leaves didn't quite meet. Outside, I could see a strip of sky and the upper parts of trees. I turned my head and saw them. They were sitting a few feet away, squat on their haunches like gorillas, but not quite, both covered in dark, reddish-brown hair. The bigger one, Ash I'd call him later, had broader shoulders and more scarred skin on his forearms. The smaller Willow had a narrower face, slightly shorter hair around the eyes. I'm using he and she now because that's what my mind settled on after years, but in that moment they were just two impossible beings watching me. Ash's eyes were locked on mine. Not aggressive, not friendly, just assessing. Willow held something in her hands, a bundle of leaves. She made a small questioning sound, like a low hum at the back of her throat, and glanced at my ankle. I followed her gaze. My left leg had been propped up on a folded bundle of something thick fur or moss, I couldn't tell. Around my swollen ankle, someone had wrapped long, flat leaves and strips of bark, soaked in something that smelled sharp and clean, like crushed pine needles and earth. I reached down reflexively, and Ash made a sharp, quiet sound, not loud, but it had a snap to it. I froze. He leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing, and then slowly leaned back again when I stopped. It was a warning without being a threat. Like, don't mess with that, it's keeping you together. I don't know how long we sat like that, me staring at them staring at me. At some point, my fear sort of flipped. I was still scared, but more in a this is too big to process way than a I'm about to be eaten way. My brain started sorting, categorizing. The hair was longer on their shoulders and hips, shorter on the face and chest. Their hands and feet were huge, but the proportions were right. Their knees bent like ours. Their eyes had whites, but not as much showing, more shadowed by bone and hair. I know the jokes. I've heard all of them over the years. I saw them up close. I smelled them. I felt their hands on my skin. Whatever they are, they're real. The first days, I think it was days, blur together. I drifted in and out of sleep. Pain, thirst, waves of panic. Every time I woke, one of them was there, sometimes both. Willow did most of the tending. She would unwrap the leaves around my ankle, sniff them, click softly, then replace them with fresh ones. Her fingers were surprisingly gentle. She never flinched at the swelling or the bruising. Ash mostly watched. He would occasionally bring things and drop them near me. Food, I realize. Roots. Berries. Once a strip of something dried that tasted gamey and tough, like smoked meat. The first time I tried to sit up properly, I got dizzy and almost fainted. Willow caught my shoulder with one huge hand and held me steady, making those soft clicks again. Ash shifted closer, his eyes flicking between my face and my ankle like he was looking for signs of failure. They spoke to each other constantly. Low rumbles, clicks, tiny glottal sounds. It wasn't random. I could tell when they were arguing. Ash's tone would go down, slower, more spaced out. Willow's would get quicker, a little higher. Sometimes they would pause and just look at each other, and something would pass between them that had nothing to do with sound. I didn't understand any of it, but I recognized the pattern. It was the same as watching two people converse in a language you don't know. I tried once to say thank you. It came out cracked, my throat still raw. T-H-H. Thank you. They both went quiet. Ash's head tilted slightly, like a dog hearing something weird. Willow blinked slowly. Then Willow made a sound I hadn't heard yet. A soft, almost breathy ha, very short. She pointed at me, then at her own chest, and repeated it. Ha. It took me a second, but I realized she was trying to mimic me, or meet me halfway. I lifted my hand, trembling, and touched my chest. Da-nah, I croaked. Dana. Ash's eyes sharpened. He made a low rumble, then tried to copy me. It came out more like D and N. The back of his throat wasn't built for our vowels. Willow tried. Nah. She pointed at me. Nah. We went back and forth for a while. Them making sounds, me making sounds. None of us really getting it right. But there was this sense of effort on both sides. They were not just nursing a wounded animal. They were trying to understand me, to let me understand them. I don't know how long I stayed in that den. Weeks at least. Time blurs when you're deep under the canopy. The light is always filtered. Days bleed into each other. As I got stronger, they let me move more. Ash would crouch nearby, watching as I tried to sit up, swing my legs over the side of the bedding, touch my heel to the ground. The first time my ankle took a bit of weight without screaming, Willow made this quick, excited series of clicks, almost like applause. They fed me constantly, roots roasted in embers, fish that tasted like trout, cooked whole on hot stones, berries I recognized and some I didn't. Once, a handful of nuts that Ash cracked open with his teeth and passed to me with his thumb and forefinger. I realized, slowly, that they knew this forest in a way we don't. Not on a map, not in species lists. Their knowledge was embodied, like they and the land were one system. They also knew about us. I started to see signs. Little things salvaged from humans, tucked into their world, a length of blue nylon rope woven into a wall of the den. The rusted blade of a pocket knife stuck into a crack in the rock, used to hang bundles of herbs. A faded scrap of plaid fabric folded carefully under a rock, like a keepsake. Once, Willow brought back a metal water bottle, dented, scratched. She held it out to me and made a questioning hum. I took it, turned it in my hands. There was a brand name on it, half worn off. Hiker, I said, pointing at it, then miming someone walking with poles. Human. Like me. Ash watched my little charade and made a grunt that sounded, just faintly, like a disgusted laugh. Then he took the bottle, unscrewed the cap with a surprisingly nimble twist of his wrist, sniffed the inside, and tossed it aside into a corner with other things. Metal bits, worn plastic, things that didn't belong. That's when it started to sink in. They weren't just avoiding us. They were cataloging us, studying us, like I studied frogs and plants. The realization was not comforting. The day I tried to leave, the air was cold and clear. I'd woken to a thin shaft of sunlight coming through the den's opening, dust motes drifting in it. My ankle still hurt, but it held my weight. I could hobble. Something had shifted in me overnight. A tightness, a need. I couldn't stop thinking about my parents, my friends. The fact that, as far as they knew, I'd just vanished. I told myself, they've done enough. You can't stay here. You can't just disappear. So when Ash and Willow left at dawn, as they did most days, always moving together, sometimes splitting up with a series of planned sounds, I forced myself to stand. I leaned on the wall of the den and made my way to the opening. The den was built into a rocky outcrop on a hillside. From the small entrance, you could see down through a confusion of trees and slopes. It was well hidden. If you weren't right in front of it, you'd never know it was there. The first breath of outside air felt harsh, cold, real. I stepped out, one hand on the rock, and took a few careful steps. My ankle protested, but it held. The forest stretched around me, endless green and shadow. For a moment, the urge to run was overwhelming. Just pick a direction and go. Find a trail, find people, get out. But I'm not stupid. I knew I had no idea where I was, and I knew, deep down, that they probably did. They'd carried me here without stumbling. They moved through this terrain like it was a living room. Still, I took another step, then another. Each footfall felt like a betrayal. Behind me, a branch snapped. Not a little twig. Something thick. I turned. Ash stood just inside the den's shadow, his head tilted, eyes fixed on me. I hadn't heard him approach. Neither had the birds, apparently. They were still singing. We stared at each other. I pointed down the slope toward where I thought civilization might be. Home, I said, my voice shaking. I touched my chest. Dana. Home. Ash's gaze followed my hand, then went back to my face. He made a low sound, almost like a groan, from deep in his chest. He stepped out, blocking more of the light, and raised one arm. He pointed down the slope too. For a second, hope flared. He understands. He'll help. Then he moved his arm slowly, tracing an invisible path. Down, across, up, around, cedar trunks, ravines, streams. He drew it like a map in the air. His hand stopped halfway, and he curled his fingers into a fist. His brow lowered. Another rumble. This one had an edge to it. Frustration, maybe anger. He opened his hand again and tapped his chest. Then he tapped my sternum very gently with a knuckle. He shook his head. I didn't get it at first. I just felt this rising panic, this sense of being caged. I have to go, I said, even though I knew he didn't understand the words. I can't stay here. Behind him, Willow appeared carrying a bundle of green. She froze when she saw me outside. Her eyes flicked to Ash, to me, to my ankle. She made a rapid series of quiet clicks. Questioning, worried. Ash answered with a slow, low rumble. His hand still rested lightly on my chest. He didn't push, but there was a suggestion there. A wait. Willow came closer, close enough that I could see the fine lines around her eyes. She reached out and, very gently, touched my face with the backs of her knuckles. Then she turned my head, just a little, toward the den. She shook her head too. Slow, firm. That's when I realized they weren't keeping me prisoner. They were afraid. Not of me leaving. Of what would happen if I did. Not to me. To them. Eventually, we compromised. Or they allowed me to think we did. Over days and then weeks, as I got stronger, they began to let me range farther. Always with one of them nearby. Sometimes I'd hobble to a stream with Willow, who would watch me fill a cup and splash water on my face. Sometimes I'd hobble upslope with Ash and sit on a rock while he stood motionless, listening to something I couldn't hear. They were careful about where we went. They avoided open spaces. They avoided anything that smelled like humans, burnt wood, not from their own fires, plastic, metal, the faint chemical tang of insect repellent. When we were near a human scent, their whole bodies changed, shoulders hunched, heads low, sounds stopped, and they had caches, little hidden spots where they kept things they'd taken or found near human trails. A broken trekking pole, a torn map, a crumpled beer can, a piece of camo fabric. They treated these things like evidence, not treasures, not tools. Evidence. Over time, with gestures and grunts and sheer stubbornness, we built a kind of language, very basic. Cold, water, food, danger, others. They had a particular sound they used when they meant humans. It was a blend of a sharp exhalation and a low click. I can't make it right. The best I can do is, "Ochk." Their faces tightened when they said it. Once, when we were not far from what I now know was a popular trail, Ash led me to the edge of a ridge. From there, we could look down through the trees and see the faint flash of color now and then. People moving along, oblivious. Ash crouched. I crouched beside him. Willow stayed back, half hidden. A group of 3 hikers passed below. They were laughing. One of them was flicking a cigarette butt into the brush. Another tossed something, maybe a candy wrapper. Ash's jaw tightened. He made that HK sound, very quietly, and pointed with his chin, not his hand. Always subtle around humans. He looked at me. Then he pointed past the hikers, down the drainage where a stream glinted. He made another sound. A soft, almost sad rumble. He brought his hand up and curved it downward slowly, like something wilting. I understood, in a vague way. They poison water. They hurt the land. It was only the beginning of what they would show me. But first, I had to leave them. You probably know this part from the old articles. Local student presumed dead in Olympic National Park. Search suspended due to hazardous conditions. All that. I don't remember exactly how I got back to a human trail. Ash did. When they finally decided to let me go, and that's what it was, their decision, Ash led me for hours through terrain that felt newly alien. Everything looked the same, moss, trees, rocks. But he moved with purpose, no hesitation. We didn't speak much. What was there to say? I limped behind him, my heart in my throat. Every step toward the world felt like walking toward an execution. At one point, Willow appeared out of the trees ahead, as if she'd been circling us. She carried something folded in her big hands. My pack, ripped, muddy, one strap torn, but mine. She held it out to me. I took it, my fingers shaking, and slid the strap over my good shoulder. It felt heavier than it should have. There was a moment then that I still see when I close my eyes. Ash reached out and touched my chest, right over my heart with his fingertips. Barely any pressure. Then he tapped his own chest. Then he pointed back, deeper into the forest. He made a series of sounds that I only pieced together years later. At the time, all I got was the feeling behind them. Be careful. Don't bring them. Don't bring hunters. Humans. Then he stepped back. Willow made a soft, breathy ha sound again, that almost laugh she did when she was nervous. Her eyes looked sad. There's no other word for it. They waited until I turned away. The last thing I heard from them that day was a single, low knock, like someone hitting a tree trunk once, hard, with a club. It rolled through the forest and faded. I stumbled on alone for another hour before I found a proper trail. 2 more before I saw people. The first human voice I heard after all, that time belonged to a park ranger. He found me sitting on a log next to the trail, holding my ruined pack and staring at nothing. I must have looked like hell. Thin, dirty, eyes too big for my face. He said, "Ma'am, are you okay?" I remember his hand on my shoulder, warm, real. I tried to answer and just started crying. They took me out by helicopter. I remember the rotors and the wind and the way the trees dropped away beneath us. I remember looking down, trying to scan the canopy for any sign of them, as if they'd be standing in a clearing, waving. Of course they weren't. What came next was its own kind of nightmare. Hospitals, IV lines, questions, reporters. My parents' faces, older than they should have been, twisted by grief and then shock and then this desperate, clinging relief. "You were gone 3 weeks," my mother kept saying. 3 weeks, Dana. We buried you. She said it like accusing the universe. The authorities wanted answers. Where had I been? How had I survived? Why did my story not match the terrain they knew? I told them I'd fallen into a ravine and broken my ankle. That part was true. I told them I'd gotten lucky and managed to climb out. That part was a lie. They asked about my pack, my gear, the condition of the map they'd found torn. Search and rescue had recovered some of my things already, scattered. I shrugged and said the weather must have done it. I didn't mention the hands that had carried me. The den. The eyes in the dark. In the dark, Every time I got close to saying more, my throat closed. Something in me felt, watched, not by them, by the forest itself, by what lived in it. The doctor said I was in shock, that I might be misremembering things, that trauma does that. He wasn't wrong, but he wasn't right either. Reporters camped outside our house. They wanted the survival story, the miracle girl. They wanted to put a microphone in my face and ask me how it felt to be dead and then not dead. The first time they tried, I froze completely. All I heard was Ash's low rumble, Willow's small, sad sounds, the wordless warning in their eyes. Humans. Hey Kay, the only animal that knows what it's doing and keeps doing it anyway. I realized, sitting there in my childhood bedroom with the shades drawn, that I didn't belong there anymore. My body was back. My name was back. But the part of me that mapped the world now, it lined up with something else. So I left. I didn't make a big thing of it. No dramatic goodbye. I just told my parents I needed to get away for a while, that the noise and attention were making it worse. I meant it. Every car that drove by felt like an intrusion. Every question from a stranger felt like a small invasion. I didn't go far. I went back to the mountains. Not exactly the same place. I'm not that reckless, but close enough that the trees felt like cousins. I found a spot far from any marked trail, a pocket of old growth that the loggers hadn't touched yet, and I built a cabin. Cabin makes it sound nice. It was a single-room shack at first. Hand tools, scavenged lumber, whatever I could haul in slowly, quietly. No road, no driveway, no power. People ask me, when they do find out about my life now, how I learned to live like that. I didn't learn. I remembered. I remembered how Ash and Willow moved, how they stored food, how they picked plants, how they read the weather 3 days ahead by the way the wind changed in the canopy. I'm not saying I became like them. I'm human. I still got sick. I still made mistakes. But the years I spent out there, they rewired me. I hunted rarely, and when I did, I used everything. I planted things near the cabin, but never in neat rows, never clear-cut. I let the forest decide. I lit my fires small and scattered. No big scars on the land. I did everything I could to be the kind of human they would tolerate, if they ever came back. For a long time, they didn't. I started to think maybe they'd moved on. Or maybe I'd imagined them. Memory does that thing where it softens the edges. You start doubting your own senses. You tell yourself they were just big, strange people, or that you hallucinated in the ravine. Anything to make it fit. Then one evening, they came back. It was late summer. The light had that golden, low angle. I was sitting on the little step outside my cabin, cleaning a pot with sand and water, when the forest went quiet. That same feeling. The blanket of noise suddenly gone. The air felt thick, charged. I didn't move. I just looked out into the trees. At first, I didn't see anything. Then a shadow detached itself from a trunk about 50 feet away. Ash. He stood there, half hidden by ferns and branches, bigger than my memory, but exactly right. Shoulders hunched slightly, head forward, eyes fixed on me. Behind him, further back, Willow's face appeared between two cedars, watching. I don't know how long we stared at each other. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingers. Finally, I did the only thing that felt right. I lowered my head. Not a deep bow, not some formal thing. Just a small, genuine dip. My way of saying, I remember. I'm still me. I'm still yours, in this weird way. When I looked up, Ash had stepped a little closer. He sniffed the air, long and slow. His gaze traveled over my cabin, my fire ring, the small patch of turned earth where I grew a few vegetables. He made a low hum, neutral maybe, not angry. Willow came up beside him. She tilted her head, studying me the way you'd study an animal that's done something unexpected. Then she did something that nearly broke me. She made that soft, breathy ha sound again, the one she'd made when she tried to say my name, and she tapped her own chest. Nah, she said. I laughed. I cried, both at once. It probably sounded insane, but in that moment, 30 years dropped away. They remembered me too. From then on, we had visits. That's what I call them. They're not on a schedule. They never were. Sometimes months would pass with nothing. Then one evening, I'd find a small pile of stones near my cabin door, or a fresh bundle of herbs on a stump. Or I'd hear that single deep knock roll through the forest. They always stayed at the edge at first, watching, waiting, letting me come to them. We never spoke in the way you'd want. No big Q&A about what they are, where they come from, why they hide. Life is not a TV show. But over years, through repetition and patience and shared silence, we built something much more complicated than anything I had with most humans. They showed me things, and they watched me react. The first time they really tried to explain their view of us, it started with trash. Ash led me along a ridge one damp morning. The fog clung low, muffling sound. We moved in that old rhythm, him ahead, me behind, Willow circling. He stopped at a small clearing. In the middle of it was a fire ring, not one of theirs, one of ours. Beer cans, plastic wrappers, half-burned logs, a rusted grill grate. Someone had even carved initials into a nearby tree. Ash stood at the edge of the clearing, like there was an invisible line he wouldn't cross. Willow stayed even further back, wrinkling her nose. I walked into the mess, my boots crunching over broken glass. I felt embarrassed, like I'd walked into a stranger's bathroom that hadn't been cleaned in months. I picked up a crushed can. Humans, I said out loud. I made their ochk sound as best I could. Ash's jaw clenched. He made a short, sharp grunt that I'd learned meant yes, but with anger. He pointed not at the trash, but at the soil under it. Then he stepped away and crouched, scooping up a handful of clean forest floor, dark, rich earth. He held it up, let it spill slowly through his fingers. It fell back to the ground in a soft puff. He made a low hum, a good sound. Then he pointed again at the trash, at the scorched, dead patch of ground under the fire ring where nothing was growing. He made a rumble that rose and fell harshly, a bad sound. He touched his chest, then he touched mine. Then he jabbed a finger at the trash, harder this time. Willow added her own sounds. She pointed at the trees around the clearing. One had a big scar where someone had chopped at it with a hatchet. She touched that wound in the bark, then touched a scar on her own forearm, then touched my arm where I have a faded white line from a cut years ago. It clicked, slowly. They were saying, "You understand hurt. You know what pain is. You heal when you can. You avoid what hurts you." Then Willow turned back to the trash and made a gesture I'd never seen from her. She opened her hands wide, fingers splayed, and shook them like she was throwing something away, rejecting it. Ash made a series of quick, sharp clicks, like punctuation, and ended with that ochk sound. Humans know what harm is. They recognize it, and they do it anyway. I felt this cold, tight knot in my stomach. Because they were right. We do. That was the beginning of their lesson. Over time, they showed me more. A stream that used to run clear, now clouded and stinking after a logging operation upstream. Ash would squat by the edge, watching dead insects drift by, and then flick his gaze up at the bright orange flagging tape on trees. He'd point at the tape, then at the water, then at my face. A hillside stripped bare, the soil sliding, trees piled in chaotic heaps. Willow would stand in the shadow of one of the last old giants and rest her hand on its trunk, her body pressed against it as if listening. Her eyes would be wet, not crying in our way, but something close. A deer carcass left to rot with only the head and antlers missing. Ash would snort and turn away, shoulders tight, making that harsh rumble deep in his chest. They knew the difference between killing to eat and killing for, whatever it is we call it. Sport, trophies, fun. They understood meat. They understood predation. They were not naive. What they couldn't understand was waste. They couldn't understand hurting for no reason. Once, deep in winter, they brought me to a hollow where snow lay in drifts. There, half buried, was a body that wasn't theirs. Human, or what was left of one. Clothes torn, skin gray. The animals had been at him. They didn't let me get close. Ash held me back with one arm while Willow moved around the site, careful, searching. She found something near a rock. A gun. Empty. Rust starting to creep over the metal. Beside it, a bottle. She picked up the bottle and sniffed it. Her face twisted. She made an ugly, choking sound and tossed it away. Ash looked at me. He pointed at the man, at the gun, at the bottle, then made an exaggerated shrug, hands up, palms out. Confusion. He couldn't understand why we would fill ourselves with poison, then walk into the teeth of weather, then be shocked when it killed us. He couldn't understand how we could know better and still do it. That phrase became a kind of theme with them, even without words. We know better. We still do it. It ate at them. You might be wondering how much of this I'm just projecting. How much of it is my guilt? My years of listening to trees creak in the wind and thinking too much. I asked myself the same thing. For decades, am I just reading human concepts into their behavior? Am I inventing their judgment? Then came the day they showed me one of their own. It was a fog-heavy evening, the kind where sound gets swallowed. Ash appeared at my cabin door without warning. No rock pile, no soft clicks from the trees. Just him, suddenly there, filling the doorway. His hair was wet. His chest was heaving like he'd been moving fast. There was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Panic. He made a sharp, urgent series of sounds and jerked his head. Come, now. I grabbed my coat, my boots, didn't even bother lacing them fully. I followed him into the trees. We moved fast, faster than usual. Ash didn't slow for my sake. He kept glancing back, making sure I was still behind him, but there was no gentle pacing this time. Just raw forward drive. Willow joined us from another direction, falling in beside me. Her movements were jerky, restless. She kept letting out these low moans under her breath. The first sign that something was wrong, really wrong, was the smell. Not the usual forest mix. This was sharp, metallic, thick, blood. We crested a small rise and dropped into a narrow hollow. The fog pooled there, holding the smell down like a lid. Ash stopped so abruptly I almost ran into him. At the bottom of the hollow, on a bed of trampled ferns and broken branches, lay a body. It was like looking at Ash from a broken mirror. Same broad shoulders, same long limbs, but twisted, wrong. The hair was matted with blood in places, chunks of it missing. The chest had a hole in it. Not a bite. More like something had torn into it for access and then stopped. The face was turned away, but I could see one eye, half open, glazed. Around the body, the ground was a mess of footprints. Not just theirs, ours. Boot prints, several sizes. The heel pattern you see on hunting boots. The crushed remains of a cigarette. A piece of neon orange fabric snagged on a branch. Beside the body, the ground was scraped bare in a rough circle. In the middle of that circle lay a small pile of things. Teeth, bits of bone, a clump of hair, trophies. I didn't go closer. I couldn't. My knees buckled. I sank down where I was, grabbing a tree trunk to keep from falling. Willow walked forward on shaking legs. She let out a sound I have never heard from anything else. Not an animal, not a human. A long, low, keening wail that rose and fell and scraped at the inside of my skull. She knelt by the body and laid her hand on its arm. Her fingers closed around the thick wrist, then opened again. Ash stayed where he was for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists so tight I could see the tendons. When he finally moved, it was slow, deliberate. He walked down into the hollow and stood over the body. He made a sound, soft, almost like a word. I don't know if it was a name. He knelt, reached out, touched the wound in the chest, then lifted his bloody fingers to his nose. He inhaled, eyes closing, then opened them again and looked at me. There was no mistaking what he was asking in that look. Why? He pointed at the boot prints, at the clump of hair in the trophy pile, at the neon fabric. His chest heaved. He bared his teeth, not in a threat, but in a grimace. Pain, rage, confusion. Willow rocked back and forth, her hands pressed to her head, making small, broken sounds. I had no answer. What can you say to that? Because we're bored? Because we like to hang parts of beautiful things on our walls. I dropped my gaze. Shame burned my face. Ash made a noise then, deep and shaking. I realized, with a jolt, that he was crying. Not like we do, with tears flowing visibly. His whole body trembled with each breath. His shoulders quaked. His eyes overflowed just enough that the hair under them darkened. He bent forward and pressed his forehead to the dead one's chest. He stayed like that for a long time. Willow leaned in, touching her brow to his back. I should have left them alone. It was a private moment. A ritual, maybe, but my legs wouldn't work. I was rooted. Eventually, Ash straightened. Something in his face had hardened, an old softness gone. He walked over to me. Stand under him like that, you understand how small you are. He's not a friendly forest giant. He's power on two legs. He didn't touch me. He just looked down, his eyes dark and flat. Then he pointed at me, tapped my chest. Once, he turned and pointed at the mess around the body, at the boot prints, at the empty beer can, at the torn fabric. He made that HK sound, but this time it was barely more than a breath, like a curse. Then he did something I'll never forget. He drew a circle in the dirt with one thick finger, a rough ring. Then he dragged his finger through it in a jagged line, breaking it. He looked up at me, eyes burning, and repeated that gesture. Circle. Slash. He grabbed a handful of dirt and crushed it in his fist, then opened his hand. The soil fell through his fingers, scattered. The circle breaks where humans walk. That's what came into my mind then. Not in words exactly. In this heavy, gut-level understanding. We're the only ones who break the circle on purpose. Later, years later, Willow would carve that same symbol on my cabin door, but in that hollow with death in the air, it was the first time I saw it. We left the body there. I asked myself, again and again after that, why they brought me, why they showed me their grief. I think now it was the only way they knew to make their point, to give their message teeth. You did this. Not you personally, but your kind. And you know it's wrong, and you keep doing it. After that day, something changed between us. They still visited. We still shared food sometimes, or sat in silence listening to rain. Willow would still occasionally bring me a plant and tilt her head, allowing me to babble about its Latin name. But the likeness, the curiosity was dimmer. They grew more cautious, more jumpy. They moved in tighter loops, circling back on their own tracks to confuse anyone following. They avoided certain valleys entirely. I started seeing more signs of hunters too, not the subsistence kind. The ones with shiny gear, high-powered rifles, scent-locking clothing. The kind who watched those monster hunting shows and half-jokingly trail-can the shadows. I overheard them sometimes, when I was near the human trails they didn't know I knew about. Sitting by a shared fire, talking about bagging a big one. Laughing about blurry photos, trading stories of roars in the night. They didn't understand what they were looking for. They thought it was a trophy. A thrill, a story. They didn't understand that what they were really hunting was something that understood them better than they understood themselves. One foggy morning, I heard 4 gunshots roll through the hills. Close, too close. I froze, hand on the cabin door. I counted the shots. 1, 2, 2. Silence. 3, 4, then nothing. The forest held its breath. No birds. No wind, somehow, just that fading echo. I wanted to run toward the sound. I wanted not to. Both feelings crashed into each other and pinned me there. Hours passed. The normal noises came back one by one. A squirrel chattered. A jay scolded something. Somewhere far off, a tree knocked, just once. They didn't come that day, or that night, or the next week. The next sign I got wasn't a visit. It was the symbol carved on my door. I woke up to the sound of something moving through the underbrush, close, heavy, careful. The light through my small window was gray, dawn, or just before. My heart thudded. Part of me hoped it was them. Part of me feared it was those hunters. I reached for the old shotgun I kept by the bed, more for bears than anything else, and waited. The footsteps stopped right outside the wall. A single knock. not on wood, on the earth itself. It seemed to come up through the floor. I let out a shaky breath, put the gun down, and opened the door. No one was there, just a forest. Mist curling around the tree trunks. The air smelled like wet leaves and something else, a faint, musky trace that made my chest tighten. I stepped out, bare feet on the cold plank. That's when I saw it. On the door frame, at about my shoulder height, someone had carved into the wood. Deep, deliberate strokes. No knife. Whatever they used, it might have been stone or just sheer strength, had bitten into the grain cleanly. A circle. Not perfect, but clear, with a jagged line cut through it. The same symbol Ash had drawn in the dirt next to his dead kin. My hand went to it. The grooves were rough under my fingers. Fresh. Splinters still flaking. Willow had better fine control. It felt like her work. I don't know why, but I knew that. For a long moment I just stood there, fingertips resting in the carved line, listening. Far off I heard tree knocks. 2, then 1, then silence. I called their names, the ones I'd given them anyway. Ash, Willow. I used the little sounds we'd shared. No answer. I grabbed my coat, pulled on my boots with clumsy fingers, and went into the forest. I followed what little sign I could find, a broken fern here, a bare patch of soil with a faint depressions there. They were better at moving unseen than anyone, but I knew them. I knew their patterns. I searched all day. My legs burned. My throat went raw from calling. Nothing. No towering shadows. No soft clicks from the trees. No rock stacks. No gifts left on stumps. Just the normal world, pretending nothing had changed. I don't know if they were killed. I don't know if they moved so far away that they never could risk coming back. I don't know if, somewhere, there are more of them, deep in some pocket we haven't ripped open yet. All I know is that from that day on, the forest around my cabin has felt thinner, not emptier. Animals still move, trees still grow. But that other presence, that heavy, watchful awareness, was gone. The circle on my door was not just a message for me, it was a warning. The circle breaks where humans walk, and once it's broken enough, some things don't come back. So why am I telling you this now, after all these years? Partly because I'm tired. I'm in my 60s now. My hands shake when I split wood. My eyesight isn't what it used to be. I can't run the way I ran after Ash that night. Time catches everyone, partly because the world beyond these trees is louder than ever. More roads, more people, more cameras. It feels like everything is rushing faster and faster towards some cliff, and the brake lines have been cut. But mostly I'm talking because this recording, this sitting in a chair and putting words on whatever medium you're hearing them through, it's the only way I know to pay my debt. They saved my life. Twice, really. Once from the ravine. Once from a kind of living death in a world that pretends not to see what it's doing. They asked one thing in return. Not with a contract, not with clear sentences, but with that circle, with that slash, with that look in Ash's eyes when he showed me the dead one. You know what you're doing. They didn't understand the physics of our machines or the politics of our borders, but they understood cause and effect. They watched us, for generations probably, from the tree line, from the shadows. They saw us make the same mistake again and again, even after it hurt us. We poison the water, get sick, clean it up a bit, and then poison it again. We clear the forests, the soil slides, the rivers clog, and we plant a few trees on the edges like a bandage. We hurt each other, over and over, with hands and words and systems. We bury our dead, cry, swear never again, and then we pick up the gun or the bottle or the knife and do it again anyway. Every other creature they knew, it learned. You stick your nose in a hornet nest. You only do it once. You go too far into the open, you get seen by predators. You change your path. Humans, we remember pain. We name it. We build monuments to it. And then we repeat it like a habit. That's what they could not understand. That's what scared them more than any bullet. When Ash looked at me that last time by the hollow and crushed that soil in his fist, I didn't just see anger, I saw fear. Not fear of us, in the sense of, these animals might hurt me. They knew they could avoid us, for the most part. Hide. Move. Adapt. It was fear of what we are. Something that sees the cliff, labels it, builds a map to it, and still steps off. We are, as far as they know, the only animal that can look at a wound and say, yes, that hurt, and then pick up the same blade and press down again. They weren't afraid of being discovered like a new species in a journal. They were afraid that, once fully in our light, they'd be absorbed into the same pattern, turned into something we can hurt, display, exploit, and feel bad about later. I can hear you thinking, well, if they're so smart, why didn't they stay away from the hunters? Why didn't they run faster? They did, for as long as they could. But our range keeps growing. Our appetite keeps growing. Our curiosity, which could be our salvation, keeps turning into a weapon. The last clear memory I'll give you is not of the body, or the symbol, or even their faces. It's a small thing. One of the early nights back in my cabin, before the dead one, before the symbol, I woke up suddenly, no reason. Just that same silence. I lay there, listening, heart ticking faster. After a minute, I realized what had woken me. Breathing. Not mine. Just outside the wall, slow and deep. I didn't move. The breathing went on for a while. Then, very softly, there was a single touch on the wall of the cabin, like someone laying their hand flat against it. No knocking, no scratching, just that quiet pressure of presence. I could picture it without seeing it. Ash or willow, palms spread on the thin wood between us, aware of the distance and the closeness at the same time. We were two creatures on opposite sides of a barrier we built, listening to each other breathe. That's what sticks with me. Not the horror, not the mystery, just that image. A big, rough hand on a fragile wall, holding still, listening, trying to decide what we are, and whether there's any version of this story where the circle doesn't break all the way through. I don't have an answer for them. I never did. All I can do is sit here, old and half wild, and tell you what they saw. What you do with it, that's on you. Just remember, next time you drop a can in the woods, or laugh about monster hunters, or scroll past another story about a burning forest,